physics is a natural science based on the study of matter. So if you're studying matter, you're only going so far. You can't make it to the core that is at the center of the sun, which is the will of God. This is not about physics. This is about mathematics. See, this ain't no physics. Somebody sitting around, oh, what is that? Coming on the planet 6,000 years ago. This is about mathematics, which is reality. God is not based in physics. He's the author of physics. He's based in mathematics. Mathematics. Islam is mathematics, and mathematics is Islam. Say He, Allah, is one. You're not even in the right subject to discuss whether or not Allah is God. You're in the wrong building. You got to pierce the physical veil and go through it to the spiritual to understand God. So this is the classroom we need to be in order to have a manifestation of the power and light of God within us. Where else can we go but into the mind of God? Now, the United States government, acting on all of these multinational corporations, number one, you know how they say on the big hits, number one. The United States is number one in the world in pollution. Yeah, while you sit around talking about who's a real American, you're number one in the world in pollution. Number one in the world in consumption of natural resources from countries all over the world. Number one in imperialist aggression. Number one in piracy and profiteering under the guise of promoting democracy. Number one in exporting death and anguish to millions of people around the world. We need to jump ship. If there was ever a Titanic, we're on it. We're on it. And God knows we've been clearly warned. We are witnessing the rapid disappearance of this civilization. It is undergoing self-destruction through obsession, retribution, and violence that it commits. And we know, beloved, this is unsustainable. This has reached the point of no return in excess and exploitation. So now you and I are experiencing the type of provocation that America is known for. It is part of her history. She will push up on other nations and even on her own people. She pushes up in such a way that you finally react, but you react violently. And then your reaction gets played out in the media so that the victim becomes the accused. Now, yes, Islam is rising rapidly in America. So there is great debate in America, fed by the media, over whether an Islamic center should be built in New York near the site of the 9/11 attacks. And Minister Farrakhan so beautifully, if you did not witness or hear the press conference in Washington, D.C., where he disposed of this issue. See, we're in the time of solutions and a knowledge that is dispositive of problems. But we are being forced to defend what is already self-evident. And that is the freedom to practice one's religion That is the law of the land. That's a constitutional right. There is a reason there are laws. Now, Minister Farrakhan teaches there are facts, and then there are interpretation of facts. There is reality, but then there is our perception of reality. Racism, one of the great impediments to self-development, gives one a damaged perception of reality. So as they go around taking polls, you don't take polls on a constitutional right. Well, 70% of the people are opposed to the construction of a mosque near Ground Zero. But we can't live according to your damaged perception of reality, because your perception of reality robs us of the right to practice our religion. Because if I have a right to build an Islamic center, but my right has to be conditioned on your depraved attitude toward my religion, then I really don't have a right. Well, they should be sensitive to the feelings of the victims and their families. Well, some of those victims and their families are Muslim. There were more Muslims killed in the attack 9/11 than the number of extremists that were responsible for it. But if we're going to use sensitivity as a basis for limiting freedom, then perhaps every Christian church in the South should move north. Since the enslavement, murder, rape, torture, and lynching of black people was conducted under the sign of the cross. And that was not an isolated event. This was not the act of a few crazed individuals. This was over a period of 3 centuries, followed by another century of torture, and supported by the church, supported by the government of the United States, held up as law by the U.S. Supreme Court. We, black people, the descendants of slaves in North America, are the best example to everyone around the world of peace. We are the only people in history that have lived among our oppressors and have not been vindictive and not engaged in acts of retribution against them. These people don't fear Islam as a religion, and they definitely don't fear this watered-down Islam that a lot of these people are practicing. And as Minister Farrakhan taught on the tsunami prayer line, as we came to the end of Ramadan, were it not for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and he and his family's sacrifice, we would not be able to sit here and talk about Islam. There are mosques all over America only because Master Farad Muhammad came here alone and met with and taught the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Those brothers and sisters were made mockery of. They were arrested and went to jail. They suffered not only at the hands of white people, but ignorant black people as well. And Minister Farrakhan continues to struggle with us all the way deep into the 21st century. He is our mercy. I'm telling you what they fear. They don't fear Islam. They fear the nation of Islam. They fear the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, under the guidance of Minister Louis Farrakhan. And let me tell you why. Let me tell you why. Not because of violence. When you go in a courtroom and your character is under attack, you are allowed to bring people from the community to testify to your reputation. You don't live on this earth and walk this earth like the sister Shirley Sherrod, who was attacked and called a racist. I can't even go down that road this morning. But how do you walk the earth for 5 decades and have a sterling reputation, and all it takes is someone immersed in hate and ignorance to throw a rock at you, and your own people are ready to cut your head off? Whether you're Christian, Muslim, Hebrew, agnostic, selling drugs, whatever you're doing, don't you ever let anybody charge the Nation of Islam with being a hate group or violent, because we have no record of that. None. We don't carry guns, knives, penknife, nothing. Well, how you gonna fight? Because if anybody points, like Cedric the Entertainer said, black people wish, I wish somebody would point something at us. We're not worried about a gun or a knife. And Minister Farrakhan has implored us for years, stop killing one another. 59 homicides in Chicago, more killed in 1 month in August than all year in Iraq. Black men killing black men with these little weapons that white people have no more use for. So they put them in our hands to kill each other. But the fear of the Nation of Islam, I want you to think this through and use logic and reasoning. If Minister Farrakhan, everybody is able to listen to him and through him fall in love with Islam, what will happen? What will happen to the food industry? We're the fattest nation. Fighting that battle. We're the fattest nation on earth. What will happen when everybody starts to eat 1 meal a day or every other day? Now, this is real. This is a billion-dollar industry. What will happen to the pork industry? We're talking serious money. What will happen to the tobacco industry? Serious money. You're talking about black people being free now of high blood pressure, living longer. What happens to the scavenger industry? I'm talking shrimp, lobster, crab, clams. What happens to the scavenger industry? Catfish. What happens to the drug industry if everybody follows Islam as taught by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad under Minister Farrakhan? Not some weak, do anything you want Islam. How to eat to live Islam. Restrictive law Islam. Have a beautiful, great life, but you can't be a freak anymore. Islam. Be yourself. You want to get high, go outside and will a star into existence. That'll get you high. And you won't have to go into rehab. You won't have to hit an old lady in the head to pay for the drugs. What happens to the drug industry? Oh my God. The cocaine, the crack, the heroin, and so on and so. What happens to the liquor trade? We're pushing up. Look, President Obama needs to meet with the minister. Don't worry about it, because they hate you regardless to whom or what. What happens to these industries? What happens to prostitution? Vegas will just disintegrate. Serious money. Domestic violence, child pornography, all sorts of criminal behavior. And the prison industrial complex, because you won't have 2 million black men to lock up. That's the fear of Islam. And all praise is due to Allah. For the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Minister Louis Farrakhan. So God is unnecessary, huh? The universe created itself. Wow. And listen, you need to be careful, you and I, about jumping headlong into everything white people invent. You know, they came out with these computers, and we didn't need this equipment back in the day. And when I say back in the day, I mean 66 trillion years ago. We didn't need this. We projected thought to one another. We had the power of God within, and we still do, but it is dormant, and it is being awakened by a light-giving sun in Minister Farrakhan. His core is not fire. His core is the will of God. His core is his teacher, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. But you got to be careful about jumping into this stuff. When these computer screens came out, and sisters in customer service, women across the board, sitting at these screens all day, all of a sudden miscarriages. You notice how the black population is leveling off and even moving into the negative? This Facebook. See, they take technology that may have been the idea of an individual whom God gave inspiration to, and then it is seized upon and misused. So now it becomes a hunting ground for predators. So our children are not finding these predators on Facebook. The predators are finding our children. We're texting everybody. The minister said texting inhibits the brain's ability to think clearly. Now we're on this thing, running into other cars, killing people. How are you? See, it's breaking us down, and our senses are diverted. Now we don't want to talk to each other. See, you don't have a meeting of the minds on the text. It's not that it's a very useful tool. Don't get me wrong, but it has a limited use. It's for a purpose. And business people invent these techniques, and then we take them and go crazy. Didn't you get my text? Why are you calling me? I already sent you a text. We don't know why they invented this. We don't know when they invented it. They'll sit on something 50 years. They had color television in 1924. There's a business decision that is made. There's a political decision that is made. But God is unnecessary. Let's talk about Ursinus Orca as we remove disrespect for Allah. Ursinus orca. That is also known as the blackfish. We know this as Shamu, the killer whale. When a male orca named Tilikum killed a female trainer at SeaWorld last year, we were all understandably horrified. But then why? What other outcome could there have been? See, I want to look into the complexities of the Creator and show you how even in the mammal world, how powerful and profound God is. And yet you would say he's unnecessary. And if we can harbor a thought, beloved, that God is unnecessary, then we will act in a way that is against the nature in which he created his creation. See, if you think it's possible that we don't need him, then we will capture a killer whale and try to make him a pet. And ultimately, we will be the loser. You can take that to the bank. Now, you look on television, you see this animal jumping out of a tank, catching balls, appearing to enjoy himself. In fact, he looks like he's smiling. That's a facial feature of the dolphin family. You know, I think panda bears are cute. I'm not jumping in there with him. He's still a bear. That's the noun, bear. Panda is an adjective. Okay, so, oh, he's so cute. So, see, you never know. And I'm getting into their fear, their irrational fear of us. Dr. Francis Cress Welsing, the profound scholar and psychiatrist who confirmed in science the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, that we will never get along with these people. There's a few among them that we can, but as a people, it can't happen because of a fear of genetic annihilation. They always fear that one day you'll snap out of it and go back to your natural self. And that's why they won't let you hear the minister or try to stop you relentlessly. Because you're not going to listen to Farrakhan and not snap out of it, even if it's for a moment. And you go back to the reefer and all, but something is different. And you'll be back this way. Praise is due to Allah. So they don't know when you're going to snap out of your nature. Now, Orcinus orca was not created to entertain at SeaWorld. His position in the ocean is balance in the food chain of this planet. Killer whales are deep. I wanted to share this with you because I found this fascinating. They are in every ocean, and most seas. They are what are called apex predators. You know what an apex predator is? That's an organism that resides at the very top of a long food chain and has no natural predators of it. That is because that organism is so dangerous and difficult to kill. So it freely kills and consumes other organisms, even members of its own species. You and I are apex predators. Now, the killer whale has one similarity with us, and that is we only know it in captivity. So the image we have is completely whack. The world only knows the black man in captivity. So its view of us is whack. Now, in making mockery of the whale, we make mockery of the greatness of Allah and the beauty and power of his creation when we put a killer whale in a tank and have people come and clap. And I have a confession to make. I went. I couldn't, Allah wouldn't let me go any further until I got that out. But never again. And that doesn't come close, this mockery we make. That doesn't come close to the depraved indifference that we show for life in our treatment of one another. We just gun each other down on sight for no reason. As hard up as we are for our men, and you got women running around saying, I don't need no man. This is an outrage. We're the mothers of civilization. How are we shaping and molding a man? We can't make a man because we're a woman, but we can make a male child desire to be a man. We can expose him to good men. And if we were a people who were in our right mind, we would realize this is a war. We would realize we are in a crisis. You don't go to the club in the middle of a crisis. Who just dropped the CD? And we're in a war being wiped out. Now, killer whales are black with a white chest, white sides, and a white patch above and behind the eye. The males are nearly 30 feet long. They weigh in excess of 12,000 pounds. And because of their size, they are the fastest marine animals, or among the fastest marine mammals in the ocean. They swim in the ocean. That alone should be a flag. They don't swim in a pool. Now, SeaWorld says there was something about the ponytail. See, this is dangerous to follow people that think like that. That's madness. It wasn't her ponytail. Now, all SeaWorld female trainers are required to have their hair in a bun. I mean, I'm serious. That's the rule now. Listen, orcas have excellent eyesight. Excellent eyesight above and below the water. They have excellent hearing. They have a good sense of touch. So Telecom was not confused about what he was looking at. He was looking at food. No doubt about it. These mammals are very intelligent. They're very sophisticated. They live 60 years in the wild, the men, the males. Females can live up to 90. Captivity cuts their lifespan in half, but studies have shown that their lifespan depends on the will of the animal to live. Now let's look at why they're called killers. As I stated, they live in all oceans, so their diet varies from place to place. They eat 500 pounds of food each and every day. They eat herring off the coast of Norway. They eat salmon in the Northwest Pacific. They eat 30 species of fish. They eat seals. They eat sea turtles. They eat squid. They even eat other whales. But what I found so remarkable is that they devote a great deal of time to teaching their offspring how to hunt and kill prey. They are the most effective killers in the ocean. They don't want to injure themselves when they're hunting. So they disable their prey before they kill it and eat it. That's what happened to the trainer. They said he was shaking her. He was throwing her around. He even landed on her at one point when she tried to escape. This is what they do with their prey. He's a predator. You named him a killer whale. We didn't name him that. Now, they will kill a sea lion by headbutting it. They will use a blow from their tail, and they will knock him into shock or unconsciousness. They will even beach themselves. And you may have seen that on Discovery Channel or National Geographic. Have your children look at this instead of looking at this madness that they're watching. And we're all in that battle. But this is fascinating information. Now, this beaching that they do, where they jump out the water onto ice, grab a seal, and then they'll wiggle back. There's somebody weighing 12,000 pounds. Wiggle backward into the water. That is not an instinctive act. It's very dangerous for him to come up out of the water like that. It could be fatal. They spend years practicing with their children, their offspring, rather, teaching them how to do this. They will even come up out of the water and grab a terrestrial mammal like a moose or deer if they catch them too close to the edge. They live in families known as pods, and they do not mate with their own relatives. They mate with members of different pods. There is one pod they've been studying for years off the coast of California, and they call it the LA pod. They have some female members of that pod that are absolutely frightening. There's a 25-year-old female, it's on video. Have them go on and watch that instead of somebody shaking their booty. Have them watch that. This female orca actually catches and takes down a great white shark. And it's for one reason. She loves shark liver. So she takes down a great white, tears him open, eats his liver, and lets his carcass just drop to the bottom of the sea, because that's all she wanted. Now, you will take a dangerous organism like that and put it in a tank. Hi, Fluffy. Hi. Hi. You're so cute. You have to stop following that kind of mindset, because that is suicidal and self-destructive. It's an act of rebellion. Now, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teaches us to rise above emotion into the thinking of God. Beyond information and knowledge, beloved, it is thinking. It is reflection that we have to engage in for growth. You can't think without growing, and you cannot grow unless you think. See, teaching is one process, learning is something else. When you go somewhere and get taught, that's part one. Part two is learn. So Minister Farrakhan gives us a curriculum where theory is presented and then is followed immediately by application. Real thinking thinking is very difficult. It's a difficult labor, and that is why so many people run from thought. But you and I, as original people, were created in a way, we're actually impelled toward thought. So we either have two choices. We either can think or we can escape thought by engaging in some activity. And knowing this, the enemies of our liberation continuously throw sport and play at us. And we find ourselves in a continuous chase for pleasure in a desperate attempt to escape thought. That's where drug addiction is rooted. Complex thinking that is the sphere of the original man, the God of the universe that we really don't want to engage in. And so we run from the power of the God within us, and that's why we're at the bottom of society. And we will never move forward until we begin to think. We must think, and we must teach our children to be thinkers. It is natural, beloved, for the original people. And if we have been unaccustomed to thinking because of the limited capability of the school system, then our first thoughts may be crude. But if we keep engaging, we will quicken new brain cells into activity. And we will actually develop new faculties. If you look at the United States on achievement lists, up until the 3rd grade, it's number 1. After the 4th grade, it begins to slide down as compared to other nations. And by the 12th grade, we're at rock bottom in the world. That says this, mathematics, very simple. This educational system maxes out at the end of the 3rd grade. After that, our children's minds are deteriorating. Now, you can think your way through any problem. Think your way out of any negative circumstance. There's enough power from the originator in us that we can dramatically change ourselves and our environment. When we sit in front of televisions, video screens, when we saturate our brain with profane language, in lyrics, in music, then we are actually being guided by someone else's thoughts. When someone else is thinking for you, and you wake up every morning and respond to that thinking, then you can never know what you are capable of, and you will end life being incapable of anything. With each passing generation, we are becoming more incompetent and less capable of doing for self. When we were picking cotton, picking tobacco, which is back-breaking, injurious, because your hands and fingers are cut. You're bent over all day. But worse than the physical is the mind-numbing effects of the repetition. See, roots did not even touch what we went through. Can you imagine what it is like to spend your entire life and no one says anything to you? There are only 3 or 4 words exchanged every day. Who do you think we were conversing with out there in that field? Our lives were controlled by an illiterate overseer. We weren't allowed to speak to one another. Most of us didn't even know where we were. Think about that. And yet, we built a nation. We built a nation for these people. We taught them architecture. how to sew and design clothing. We built Washington, D.C. We built the White House in slavery and as slaves. Now that we're in the educational system, and this proves to you it's at its end, we cannot even build shelter for ourselves. We are caught up in mortgages where we're paying 5 to 10 times the value of a place that we could build ourselves. We go to the white man, the children of our slave masters, and let them rent and sell us inadequate housing for 10 times its value. We no longer can feed ourselves. We fed ourselves in slavery with leftovers, with the intestines of a hog. And yet today, we can't feed ourselves. We go in their stores. We buy what they want us and tell us to eat. We cannot clothe ourselves. We go to stores and our little girls and women are made to look like prostitutes. There's nothing for sale that's decent. We have to learn again how to sew, how to design clothing that is beautiful and yet modest. We go to schools based on the architecture of white supremacy and black inferiority, and our children are coming out semi-literate and filled with self-hate. That's why they shoot each other. That's why they beat each other with bats walking to school. But we do not have to accept this situation. Whatever is in your way, it will give way. If you engage in sustained, continuous thinking like God, we cannot tamper with creation and then justify interfering with it, saying there is no God, and if there is one, he's unnecessary. So when you take a 12,000-pound killing machine and feign shock and dismay when he eats a woman, he's acting in accord with his nature. He's doing what he was created to do. The chimpanzee had had enough of this woman making him her husband. So one day, his natural self came out and he tore her best friend's face off. Oh, he and I used to eat filet mignon, and we used to drink wine together. And the officer that shot him said I had to kill him because he was trying to open the door to get in the car and attack me. And they said, oh, the chimpanzee can get in the car. She said, oh, he can drive. When the lion attacked the trainer last week. Oh my God, oh my God. What happened? We think he saw something that irritated him. He didn't see nothing that irritated him. He was being himself, the king of the beasts. I'm tired of this sandwich trying to control me. I'm going to eat it and get it over with. What's going on here? So, they feign ignorance when they're up against the wall, when their madness is exposed. President Obama had enough. He finally came out and said, they talk about me like a dog. Now that's our saying in the hood. They talking about him like a dog. They feigned ignorance of what he meant. You know what he meant. They had programs on it. He said we talked about him like a, is he saying that we called him a dog? Where's the tape where we did that? Or are they saying we barked like a dog at him? See, feigning ignorance to cover rebellion. It's like when you bust your children, whether or not Allah is God. You're in the wrong building. You gotta pierce the physical veil and go through it to the spiritual to understand God. So this is the classroom we need to be in order to have a manifestation of the power and light of God within us. Where else can we go but into the mind of God? Now, the United States government, acting on all of these multinational corporations, number one, you know how they say on the big hits, number one. The United States is number one in the world in pollution. Yeah, while you sit around talking about who's a real American, should be built in New York near the site of the 9/11 attacks. And Minister Farrakhan so beautifully, if you did not witness or hear the press conference in Washington, D.C., where he disposed of this issue. See, we're in the time of solutions and a knowledge that is dispositive of problems. But we are being forced to defend what is already self-evident. And that is the freedom to practice one's religion. That is the law of the land. That's a constitutional right. There is a reason there are laws. Now, Minister Farrakhan teaches there are facts, and then there are interpretation of facts. There is reality, but then there is our perception of reality, retribution and violence that it commits. And we know, beloved, this is unsustainable. This has reached the point of no return in excess and exploitation. So now you and I are experiencing the type of provocation that America is known for. It is part of her history. She will push up on other nations and even on her own people. She pushes up in such a way that you finally react, but you react violently. And then your reaction gets played out in the media so that the victim becomes the accused. Now, yes, Islam is rising rapidly in America. So there is great debate in America, fed by the media, over whether an Islamic center. Physics is a natural science based on the study of matter. So if you're studying matter, you're only going so far. You can't make it to the core that is at the center of the sun, which is the will of God. This is not about physics. This is about mathematics. See, this ain't no physics. Somebody sitting around, oh, what is that? Coming on the planet 6,000 years ago. This is about mathematics, which is reality. God is not based in physics. He's the author of physics. He's based in mathematics. Mathematics. Islam is mathematics, and mathematics is Islam. Say He, Allah, is one. You're not even in the right subject to discuss what. You're number one in the world in pollution. Number one in the world in consumption of natural resources from countries all over the world. Number one in imperialist aggression. Number one in piracy and profiteering under the guise of promoting democracy. Number one in exporting death and anguish. to millions of people around the world. We need to jump ship. If there was ever a Titanic, we're on it. We're on it. And God knows we've been clearly warned. We are witnessing the rapid disappearance of this civilization. It is undergoing self-destruction through obsession